Hello, evolving humans. It's Ananda from Galactic Mystic. Let's talk about Uranus retrograde. Okay, Uranus retrograde. If you have not yet honored me with your subscription to this YouTube channel, please take a moment and do so now. There are a lot of exciting things happening on this channel very soon, and you won't want to miss it. And I would love to have you in the family. Uranus was discovered in 1781 by an astronomer by the name of William Herschel. Now, this discovery totally rocked the scientific community because ever since Saturn had been discovered by Galileo in the 1600s, it was believed that Saturn was the end of our solar system. So it was a shocking event, a mind-expanding event, which is so appropriate for what we know about Uranus as astrologers. He is the great awakener, the sacred rebel, and he transcends any and all social programming. And in order to meet him properly, we have to open our minds. Now, he was named after the Greek god of the sky, whose divine feminine counterpart was none other than Gaia, who was also his mother because mythology is weird. But he was born via parthenogenesis, which means he had no father. He sprung from the womb of Gaia herself with no outside help. Pretty rebellious to begin with. A pretty rebellious way to be born, outside of the norm. Uranus is the planet of freedom and individuality. He serves us, he teaches us by breaking the chains of whatever prison we're in. He will stop at nothing to serve up revolution on both collective and personal levels. The thing is we don't always see him coming because he is unpredictable at his core. He serves up shock and awe, and it is neutral in energy, meaning he doesn't have ill intent. He doesn't necessarily have good intent either. It is pure eccentric awakening. Maybe not even eccentric, just awakening, shock and awe. So he, as a planet, even just astronomically, he's a little bit unusual. He and Venus, both of them, rotate backwards, at least according to our perspective and in relation to the other planets. But Uranus takes it another step further, where he not only rotates backwards, but he rotates on his side, at least in relation to the other planets, because what's up or down when we're in space, right? It's all about perspective. So in relation to the other planets, he is on his side with his rings kind of like this. Now, speaking of his rings, I laugh about the fact that, I don't know, I can imagine Uranus kind of looking over at Saturn, who must have thought that his crown of rings, made him the ultimate monarch of the solar system. And then Uranus shows up, shock and awe, lightning bolts with rings. So he's like, "Sup, Saturn? How's your crown?" So he doesn't care about manners or niceties, and where he is in the natal chart shows us where the whispers of rebellion lie in each of us. So if he is retrograde in the natal chart, this person may outwardly appear like a normie, like a normal, conventional sort of person, but inwardly, the gears of rebellious genius are working over time because these people are mentally free from societal truth, societal, I almost said conformies because I said normies, but maybe that applies. So they're free of societal conformies. They often have a rich and fantastical fantasy life because their minds are free. Their consciousness has access to certain edges of truth where others rarely go. This is a mind that is free inside, yet the outward expression of that freedom may be a challenge. So, as with all things related to living in a consciously aware manner and using astrology as a guide, awareness is key. So with that in mind, there are certain questions you can think of them as journal prompts or just, ponderings for a person who has natal Uranus retrograde. These questions are things like, where am I safe to rebel in my life? How do I know if I'm supposed to conform or to break out into my own authentic expression? How do I know if information is misleading or truthful? How can my mental freedom manifest into my life in a real way, in a tangible way? And which authority figures do I trust? And which would I offend if I spoke freely? Pretty interesting, right? And telling about the times that we are in, depending on when you're watching this, Uranus is currently retrograde in the sky transiting. So this brings us to, what does it mean when Uranus is retrograde in the sky, transiting Uranus retrograde? So much of what is true for an individual who has natal Uranus retrograde becomes true for the human collective when he goes retrograde in the sky. He spends about 6 months out of every 12 retrograde. And I find that to be pretty interesting because, the challenges we all face when it comes to expressing our individuality, our authenticity, I cannot talk today, authenticity, and to advocate for our free existence, which is a universal law. Humans are free. Consciousness is meant to be free. We are sovereign beings, right? So I totally lost where I was going with that. But basically, this struggle against oppressive forces has always been in the human collective consciousness. It's interesting to think about that Uranus spends about half his time retrograde and about half his time direct to sort of give us these opportunities. Well, let's talk about what it's like for the collective when he is retrograde. So when he is retrograde, this can create a simmering frustration in the collective. And as we turn our desire to be free in whatever way we are pursuing, as we turn that desire inward and upward towards our minds, it can fester there and bubble. But as it is festering and bubbling, it can forge new pathways. You know how when things fester and bubble, we can kind of think of the act, like the chemical act of fermentation, which actually creates new life, right? So it's like that bubbling, like a cauldron in our minds. It can create new ideas. Now, we may find that we can't necessarily make much headway or gain traction on those new ways to be free or new ways to have authentic expression. But once he goes direct, usually there's a huge surge of information, or a huge surge of movement in that way, rather. And to that end, the days that Uranus stations. Now, when we talk about a planet stationing, what we mean is the planet, is moving along in the sky, and then it's about to go direct, but it stops for a couple days, usually, depending on the planet. It stops at a certain degree at the zodiac and then goes retrograde back at that same degree. So when planets reach the degree that they're going to turn retrograde on, they basically stop in the sky. That's called stationing. Now, when we're talking about retrogrades, when a planet stations, it has not quite yet gone retrograde because it's still. The same thing happens when it's going retrograde and it's about to go direct. It will station, stay still, and then go direct. So these days of stationing, the station days, are really days to pay attention to, because there's something about that. I don't know what is in my throat. There's something about that change in energy, like stopping the flow of energy and getting ready to reverse it. It can be really, really intense. For instance, when Uranus stationed, this just last week was August 19th when he stationed. That's when all this stuff in Afghanistan began. Shocking events, right? So yes, pay attention to those station days. And if you want to know when the station days will be for when Uranus goes direct for this cycle, the 2021 to 2022 cycle, visit my website for the dates. I'll put the link in the description box. And while you're there, you may want to take a look at the Pluto return video, the Neptune opposition video, and some of the things I've put together for the United States astrology, because when Uranus goes direct in January of 2022, we are astrologically speaking, and in relation to the United States, there's a lot going on. So heads up. I hope this was informative and helpful. And as always, I'm available for readings, mentoring, all sorts of stuff. Love you guys. See you next week or sooner.